Hi, Joe. Welcome to Venture with Grace.
Hey, Grace.
Okay, let's start with your graphic novel before we jump into the real talk about AI, everything. Tell us more about like the graphic novel, and then since you've been vibe investing since 1999, tell us more about what are the vibes that you're getting these days.
Sure. The graphic novel Silicon Heroes was something I wrote maybe 8 years ago, and the idea was a lot of kids grow up worshiping influencers and movie stars and rock stars, but I get to work with superheroes every day in the form of entrepreneurs. And so I wanted to write a book that would maybe inspire kids to look up to entrepreneurs and think, I could do that too. So that was the idea. It's been a lot of fun over the years, and the book I try to give a copy to every entrepreneur that I work with, and so hopefully the word will slowly spread.
Totally. Okay, I want to learn more about. Okay, so you've joined Emergence 13 years ago, and obviously you have invested in some really cool companies. Like I like Together AI, and then there's like Build.com, and like you have went through a bunch of different era. And why don't we talk about like speaking of AI, I feel like a lot of people have been building AI since like many years ago. What's new about this new AI wave? And then we could jump into the things that you have invested in, obviously.
Sure. I mean, machine learning as a concept has been around for a while. I think in the past, though, you had to build everything yourself. And I think what makes this new wave different, call it the last 2 years, is that startups get to take advantage of literally billions of dollars of R&D that Anthropic and OpenAI and Meta have put in. And so they get to just sit on top of that and just focus on last mile value. Like, how do I create the workflow? How do I create my algorithm? How do I create the last mile of value? And then how do I monetize that really quickly? And so I think for the first time in history, you're seeing really small teams. I guess the word is tiny teams. You're seeing tiny teams create a ton of value extremely fast. And so that's that's what's cool over the last couple of years.
For sure. I wonder, so like, okay, so one of the articles that you wrote is about like small language model. And, why don't we start with like, what is small language model? And then what is like the trend behind this?
Yeah, so the concept of a small language model is, what if you could have a model that was highly specifically tuned for one use case? So maybe it's like legal documents, right? Rather than
I have another question for that. So what's the difference between small language model and vertical AI? Because that sounds vertical AI to me.
Yeah, I mean they're adjacent, right? So vertical AI just means that you're focused on solving workflows and problems for one specific industry vertical. Small language models don't necessarily have to be related to a vertical, but it's how do I train a small model very specifically on one type of data, and then as a result, it should be faster, cheaper, and more performant. And so you could imagine a world where instead of everybody calling one giant model over and over again, you're actually calling an orchestra of lots of different models. You pick the right model for the right use case, and it should be faster, cheaper, and more performant.
Can you tell us more about like how do you train a small language model? And then there's like model merging and spectrum.
Yeah, so there's kind of two different ways you can train a small language model. You could train it from scratch. So the similar techniques that you would use to train a big model, you would just use a small corpus of data and train it. The second way is you can distill from a big model, or you can merge from a big model. And so if you're distilling, let's say you take Llama 3, you might say, I only want the coding pieces. So I'm going to distill it down and just keep the coding parts. And then you could say, okay, well, I really want to be able to code in Spanish. So then I could merge it with a model that's really good at Spanish, and then I'd have coding plus Spanish. So there's kind of these ways that you can create small models without having to train from scratch.
And you have invested in RCAI. So like, how do you how do you find out about the company? And then what was in the entire small language model landscape that you feel like this would be an opportunity?
Yeah, so RCAI was an interesting story. I got introduced from Vipul, who's the CEO of Together AI. And so he thought highly of the team. He thought highly of their tech. So I met them and made the investment. What was the second part of the question?
So like, I'm sure you have seen a lot of like innovation in the small language model space. Like, I guess maybe you could give us some context on like, how does the industry work? And then what are some other players in that particular domain, and then how do you kind of like pick this company?
Yeah, what I think is so interesting is I'm not sure, like small language models work really well if you're a big enterprise and you want to have control of your IP, and you don't want to necessarily give that training data to OpenAI or someone else. In those use cases, it can work really well. For most general use cases, though, people are finding that the big models are getting so good so fast and so cheap that they may as well just keep using the big models. So it really depends on what your use case specific is.
So I guess like how does a company that like work with them? So for example, let's say if I'm a I think like from like a sensitive data perspective, I don't know what's sensitive, I guess like I don't know, legal or something. I know that they have clients like Intel and like these other companies. Like let's say I'm an Intel, how do I work with RC?
Yeah, I mean, so Intel would probably be more on the infrastructure side. So they'd probably want people to be training models in Intel's cloud or something like that, or Oracle or NVIDIA. What's more likely is, let's say you're a hedge fund, right? And so you have all these proprietary algorithms you built. You have all this proprietary financial data and information and how you do things. You may want to train a small model on how you specifically, execute your trades or how you specifically do your research. And you wouldn't necessarily want that going out to anyone else. That's maybe a better example.
So how would they like, I guess like how would they charge, or like how would they work with like a hedge fund? So like would it be like the hedge fund like just like they still have to build tools to on top of RC, or like I guess like how do they work with them? I know that they have like selling like RC conductor and then orchestra, like since like some of the listeners who may not be like as technical as you, like how do we understand that from like a business perspective?
Yeah, so RC built a platform that lets people makes it easy for you to send a pipeline of data for training. The new products that they've released, Conductor, which I think released yesterday, Orchestra, which released last month, these are actually separate products that allow you to use your small language model. So Conductor, for example, lets you use your small language model through a routing layer, which says if the small language model is going to return the best result, use it. If not, use something else. So it just provides kind of an intelligent routing layer. So companies that way can basically say, I connect to one API endpoint, and then from there I can access OpenAI, Anthropic, Meta, my own small language models, whatever the right thing is for the job.
I wonder, so like, okay, so another thing that you mentioned about like is spectrum. So like optimize training by targeting specific layer module while freezing others. So like, what does that entail? Like, sorry, non-technical, would love to learn from you on like, what does that mean for regular human being?
Yeah, so that's part of the merging process or the distilling process. So what that means is, let's say you start from a big open source model like Llama 3, but you only care about one specific thing. Like you only care about legal documents, or you only care about Spanish. So you can basically say, I'm going to freeze the model. I'm going to choose all the parts that are related to what I want, and I'm going to get rid of the other parts. And that way the model can be much smaller, much faster. And then again, you can also add in components of other models. Like let's say you want it to be great at Spanish and German. So you can make it a great Spanish-German model. These are terrible analogies, but you get the concept.
Got it. Wait, I have a question for you. So like how much are people spending on small language model versus like big language model? And then is this going to be a trend, or like is this like they're going to both coexisting with like large language model and small language model?
Yeah, I think they'll both coexist. What's really cool about small language models is they're really inexpensive to train. So in the case of like distillations or merging, you're talking about like less than 1% of the cost of what it would have cost to train from scratch. So it's just incredibly inexpensive, and it also means you can experiment. So you can try different small language models, see if they work, and if they don't, you haven't lost much.
How do people, I guess, like another thing is like, okay, so I also want to, I mean, I'm sorry, I feel like I went through these blogs and now like I asked like multiple questions that's like not in order. Okay. That's like a really interesting observation. And then is there something else that in that particular category in the small language model that you feel like are really interesting? And I guess like also what's a monetization strategy? And it's just like I feel like is this more towards like let's say I'm a hedge fund and then I pay you to use RZ to like I guess train my model, and then do I have to have like an entire technical team to build on top of this like small language model training platform, or like or is this more towards like I buy your product once and then I'm good to go?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of two customers, right? One customer says, I want to use your platform to train my small language model, and then I'm just going to take it and run it myself in AWS SageMaker or on Together AI, wherever. Second customer says, I want you to help me train it and I want you to host it, and I just want an API endpoint so I can send a request to the API, hits the model, sends me a request back. And so RT can have an ongoing relationship with customers if they want hosting as well. Yeah.
Got it.
We talked about monetization. So like one of the most interesting trend that I see right now, let's take another company I'm on the board of, Bolt.new, right? So they've grown revenue really, really quickly. But a lot of their revenue winds up going to Anthropic. So, for those who don't know, Bolt is a website creator or web app creator. You can type in a prompt and it can automatically create, the code from scratch for a custom website or web app. Their gross margins are pretty solid, but they still wind up paying millions of dollars a month to Anthropic. Not every single request needs Claude Sonnet 3.7, latest model, most expensive model. If they could send half their volume for maybe the easier requests or the more simple requests to their own small language model, that would be free to run, or essentially free to run. They could save a ton of money. So I imagine that there are a lot of companies that as LLMs become more ingrained in everybody's processes and as volume increases, we call it lift and shift. There's going to be a lot of companies that will send the hardest 20, 30% of their prompts to OpenAI or Anthropic, and then can send 60, 70% of the more easy ones to their own models and save a ton of money, or a Llama model and save money.
So if they send the customer to like a particular platform, like do they get like a, I guess, agency fee or no?
No, I mean, today, if you're using RC's router and they send the request to OpenAI or Anthropic, they usually just send it using the customer's API key and the customer pays directly.
Got it. Okay, so another question is like, one of your articles you were talking about like, cloud-based customer relationship management. Maybe like, I guess like nowadays, like I feel like in the AI space, I see a lot of like customer relationship management tool in the AI space, or like AI SDR, or like just like AI everything. What are some stuff that you feel like are not fluff, or like, actually have longevity in the space? And maybe you could share a little bit more about like how does the money flow in the customer relationship management space? And back in time is like maybe the cloud-based stuff, and then maybe today, what are some trends in the AI space that you feel like are interesting?
Yeah, so there's a wave of companies that are supporting kind of AI go-to-market, and it's exciting to see, but I don't think anyone's really cracked the code yet. So there's a lot of these AI SDRs. Some people can have success with them. Other people say that they're basically just burning all of their leads and sending them lots of messages, right? I think the key is that people have to focus and really figure out how to use these agents for their advantage. So right now, the ones that I see performing well are ones like Unify, where they're helping to gather information, they're helping to gather data, they're helping to piece together all of the actions that a good SDR would be doing. And then that SDR is taking all that information and crafting the right message and going outbound. And so it's kind of like giving the sales reps or the SDRs superpowers and saving a ton of the work that they would have been doing before. Those ones seem to be having the most success right now. Now, I think in 2 to 3 years, the agents are going to get a lot better, and you're going to find use cases where they can be successful. And today there are some, like we just looked at a company recently, I can't say the name, but their entire outbound process was AI automated. And they were doing all the way through like negotiating contracts and having, counter signatures go across on the contract. Now, the price point for that company was like $99 a month. So it's not like mega contracts, but they were completely automated, no humans in the loop.
Is this Unify, or what's
that company's not Unify. Unify is a good example of how AI agents today can really be helping humans do their job better.
Can I ask what is the other thing? I want to check it out.
I can't say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. So I wonder, another thing about like, I guess like, another thing is about like industry cloud data. So like you said, like industries ripe for in cloud data solution typically are legacy data systems in silos, and then large enterprise with hybrid multi-cloud on-premise development and regulation around data sharing and acceleration of digital transformation. So what are, I guess, like for cloud data, like can you share a little bit more about like um how does it works? And then like since like I feel like in the AI space, the other day I was chatting with another company. They're like a really big, I would say like traditional internet company, and then they're mentioning about like selling data. I guess like selling, I don't know, like customer, yeah, just like customer data, or like not. I don't even know if it's considered customer data, but because it's like kind of published. Let's say I don't want to mention a specific company, but let's say like let's use Quora as example. This company's not Quora, by the way. This is hypothetically. So Quora has like a lot of these answers, right? Those are like data, and then can you just like package that and then sell to other people, or like is that illegal? And what is like industry cloud data in this case that you were thinking? And then is this like still ripe because with AI and everything?
Yeah. So that blog post was talking about what if people made industry data stacks. So if you think about the modern data stack is a term that we use to describe Snowflake, Databricks, kind of these cloud data warehouses and all the terms that go around them. And so the idea was, well, what if you had a vertical specific data stack? So like take retail, for example.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
like-
I can show this graph. I think this is your graph. Let me share a screen. Yeah, is this blog? Sorry.
Yeah, the modern data production pipeline. So this was a blog post that we wrote, kind of just dissecting a few years ago. And so the idea was, what if you could make this but specific to an industry, so that out of the box, all the connectors to ingest data, all of the analytics, like all of the business intelligence that may come, further out on the right of this, all of that could be out of the box if it was highly tuned for that specific industry. And we felt like, if that was possible, you could charge more than what somebody would pay today, having to stitch together all these tools themselves.
I have a question for you. What is event data, and then what is production data, and what is external data?
Yeah, so event data is like if someone's on a website, every click streams, like those would all be events, or
okay.
any kind of individual action item that gets sent across as like a log file, like that would be event data. Production data is just like all the stuff related to their app. And then external data would be in the case of like, how do I merge things that may exist outside of my four walls into my data set so I can do something with them. So for example, in financial services, like if you're like my company Total Expert, they do CRM and marketing automation for financial services. They combine lots of third-party data, like loan data that credit data on a consumer may be out there, and they want to append it to their data set so they have a better view of their customer's customer. So that's an example of external data.
Okay. So, and then ingestion. So basically you just collect all of these, like the event data, which is like where does customer click, and then product data, which is production data, which is like I guess just data, and then external data is like outside data. Basically, this is internal, this is external, right?
Yep.
And then you put them into like the ingestion space, 5 trillion. Obviously, I feel like that's very famous. Okay, so and then you put the stuff here, and then I guess like what does this layer do? So like, do people just like I guess like sort stuff out, or like make sure everything is like like what do they even do in the ingestion space?
Yeah, so the ingestion layer, I kind of like it sounds like it should be smart. It's really not. All it's doing is taking tables that exist in other systems and dropping them into your cloud data warehouse or your cloud data lake. So that could be like for a retailer, that could be Shopify. Like it's just taking a bunch of data from Shopify, recreating that table, putting it in Snowflake. The magic happens at the transformation layer, which is right beneath the data warehouse. That transformation layer, we invested in a company called Coalesce. We didn't put it on here because we were trying to make that investment when when we published this post. We didn't want people to know about it, but we made the investment and it's doing really well. So at the transformation layer, you're basically performing all the logic to make the transformations, to make the data, to take the data from raw tables into something useful.
Oh, I have a question. So like for this like data lake situation, why is data lake called data lake? And then what's the difference between data lake and data warehouse? Because
Yeah.
I see them all the time, and then I watch like 5 YouTube tutorial that I feel like I don't understand what's the difference.
You and me both. So a data warehouse just means that it's structured data. So it's like
Okay.
relational database. So everything's rows and columns. And a data lake could just be anything. It could just be a stream of log files. It could also have structure. It could be unstructured, like documents. It's just like a place to dump everything.
So stream processing and then query engine. And then we actually have former Starburst employee on this pod before. But like, okay, so what does these two things do, by the way? And then does this graph flow from here to here and then here to here? Or like does this graph flow from like here to here?
I would think of it more like those are 3 different places that might feed data into the data warehouse. So stream processing is just something like, so Confluent is a commercialized version of Kafka. You can just think of it as like, there's a bunch of event stream data that would go through a stream processor, and then you may structure it into rows and columns, but it's going to come at you just like a whole bunch of log files, like Shopify. It may just be like, here's all the orders that have happened today. And it's just going to be like, Grace bought this, Joe bought this, someone else bought this. And then you have to take that and put that into a customer record in your data warehouse.
Okay. And then the query engine is just, I guess, like put them in order. Can I understand it that way or no?
I honestly couldn't even tell you about that. I don't know why it's actually in that exact spot.
Sorry. I feel like, no, you will be like a lot. I mean, you're an expert compared to me. So like, I feel like as long as if you don't know, I don't know. But, and then, yeah, no, like, I'm like, I thought this graph was like very sophisticated. And then I'm like, I think this is like very important. So I like literally download the graph because I want to like understand what's going on here. Okay. So you're saying transformation is like really important. And then I guess like data warehouse is just like where you storage everything. And then, so what do they do at the transformation layer?
A lot of it would be combining multiple tables. So you might have a table that's like all your customers' orders, and you also might have a table which is like all of the subscriptions to your newsletter, and maybe you want to be able to segment your data a certain way and say, give me all the people that have made 3 purchases that also subscribe to the newsletter and are in the southeast of the United States. And so you'd need to create a join, and you might have to combine those different tables into a new table so you can run that analysis. So that's what the transformation layer is. It's just taking data from different places and putting it together in a way that makes sense.
Got it. And then what about IDEs and collabs?
Oh boy. So basically,
sorry, like this is not a me term. I'm sorry about this. I feel like I should have told you before.
So those are layers where people can work on, writing their SQL queries together, or like areas where they can get a view into the data warehouse. Last mile, the one above it, that's how do I get data out of my data warehouse and into my end systems. So maybe I want to get data from my data warehouse to my email marketing tool, or my Salesforce, or my customer service, software. So that's that connector. Model building, that's like for the data scientists who need to who want to build things on top of the data warehouses. Those are the tools that they would use to, to write their scripts for creating models. The majority of the output is generally going to be BI, business intelligence, and analytics. So graphs, dashboards, etc. Up above, the outputs are from that last mile category. It's kind of what are the SaaS applications or places that I'm sending data to. And then below it, from the model building side, it's like, what are the places that I can productionize machine learning algorithms? And so basically the data would feed the models, and then it would feed some sort of a production system.
Mm. So okay, so on this graph, like where would you say is like the most like amount of money goes to? Is this like would it be like on around
Yeah,
this area or?
hands down, data warehouse and data lake. I mean, the places where you're storing your data are right now taking the largest chunk of the revenue.
Mm. But it also sounds like the less sophisticated thing to do, or is it not? Like literally,
I mean,
I
it's
do agree with you. I spend a lot of money on like storing my videos on StreamYard, but I actually don't know what goes into it to like governance, like this storage thing. And then I feel like it sounds like a technology that's very ancient, to be honest. Like,
yeah, but databases are just they've had winners ever since the 70s and 80s. There's just always been a new database that does something slightly faster, slightly better, slightly cheaper. The irony for me is that Snowflake started off just being built on top of Amazon, right? And so Amazon had Redshift, which was essentially a cloud data warehouse, and it totally blew it. Snowflake took over, and now Databricks is taking over. So, yeah, people have to spend a lot of money to keep their data in a safe place and have it be highly performant for them to run calculations and queries and everything else.
I guess like for like a traditional startup, do you have to go through every single milestone here, like to build an AI company, or no?
No, I mean this is less to do with building an AI company. This was kind of, I think this graph is maybe 5-6 years old.
But
That
I still feel like this is very good graph because like a lot of the company that are like pretty popular now. So that's why I
Yeah,
like kind of like saved it.
maybe I should have made more investments in it. Yeah,
Okay, so yeah, that's like actually really interesting. So what about like do you have like a newer version
you know,
like the AI side of things on this thing?
yeah, we
Like a new
created one.
graph?
I don't know if we ever published it, but we created one internally. Was a thesis around for how we invested in Together AI, and it was essentially
Mhm.
what are the kind of steps and tooling to get value out of LLMs, and so all the way from
Mhm.
training, through to inference, and then
Mhm.
after inference, you kind of have all of the like model testing and evals and all that kind of stuff. So we built a version of this. I don't know if we ever published it live though.
Oh, I have a question for you about Together AI. So I know Together, well, obviously Together AI is like a really big company. Like I guess like yeah, a really big company now. And then like I wonder, when I think about reselling GPUs or like Groupon GPU or like group buy GPU, that's like something I've never think of will be like a huge business. And like, can we talk about like what's in this industry? Um, and then like why is this like a really good business in your mind?
Yeah, so it's a little bit more than just Groupon for GPUs.
I'm sorry, I made this up, but I
Uh,
was like literally I was like, what is like Together's like competitors and like but the
yeah,
other day I was thinking about is this like a Groupon for GPUs?
yeah. I mean, I get the analogy. So they do two things. One is they provide the GPU capacity for people to train or fine tune or run inference on models.
Mhm.
But the second thing is they have lots of software that they've written to make their clusters run extremely fast and extremely efficiently.
Mhm.
So the chief AI scientist or chief AI researcher at Together AI, his name's Tree Dow. He was the guy who wrote the famous Flash Attention paper. Or
Mhm.
I think technically it's called Flash Attention 2, and he also wrote Flash Attention 3. Anyways, these algorithms are basically have become industry standard for how you train LLMs. And so having that
Mhm.
chief scientist at Together means that their algorithms and their data centers just run extremely fast. Uh,
Mhm.
and if something trains faster, then it should also be training cheaper because you require less time. So
Mhm.
when you use the Together platform, you're not just getting the hardware, you're also getting all the software and all the know-how.
Mhm.
I think that's why customers, generally speaking, choose them over going to like AWS or someone else.
Got it. And like I guess like why would it become like a why would they have like $100 million ARR at some point?
Because model training is expensive.
But like I think like that's gonna change, don't you? Or like is like gonna be
It is changing, right?
always
But
expensive?
what I think is so interesting about Together is they want to serve the entire life cycle, right? So
Mhm.
people, when they do their training, they may spend $10 million in a 3-month period to do a hero run where they're training their model. And then they may only spend a couple $100,000 on inference every month after that. But we can serve both customers. And what's so interesting is you have these customers that will come and go training big models. It's kind of lumpy, but the inference is very consistent, and it tends to just grow over time. So I could see a world, and part of our thesis was, I could see a world where the amount of inference that people are running just keeps growing exponentially. And that side of the business winds up becoming much bigger over time.
What's like, I guess like one of the companies that I feel like you are also like, you invest in a lot of sales related companies from SalesLoft. That's like a very big success. And then recently like Salio, I don't know if that's like how you pronounce it, but that's like helping you make demos. And then like, why don't we talk about like, what are some interesting things that you're seeing in the sales space? And then how do you find these like interesting companies, and then like what's like core competency that you need to not be just like a one-time hit? Because I feel like a lot of the companies that were doing like sales AI or AISDR or like sales demos or like helping you improve sales in general are leveraging, it's like either AI wrappers or like I guess like doesn't really have longevity in the space. Like how do you think about like the entire sales sales roadmap, or like where can you actually get like efficiency by leveraging AI?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, like Emergence has done a lot of investing in sales tech. It's a category we love. Starting from our first investment ever with Salesforce, that worked out pretty well. And so sales tech is great because it just has hard ROI. Like people aren't going to buy it unless it makes them more money than what they're spending. So like there's usually a very clear ROI story. And then it's just about finding a category where you're doing something fundamentally hard or that just has fundamental market pull. So I'll give you an example of each. So SalesLoft was more about the latter category. So they just had fundamental market pull. I don't think that sales acceleration, kind of the email automation, that kind of stuff, I don't think it was hard, but I don't think it was extremely hard. But it hit the market at the right time. And the leader there, Kyle and Rob, they were just absolutely amazing at building community brand and kind of playing on that market pull. And so that company was wildly successful. And then, Salio is a little bit different. Like they're building something very fundamentally hard. They're using AI to help people customize live demos, which is something that when you say it, it's like, oh, that can't be that hard. It's actually extremely hard. So like using your live production software to give a demo so it has every new feature, but you can't just do it with fake data because that fake data is static. And so it takes something like SalesLoft. All the charts and graphs are related to, hey, this is what my pipeline looks like or my funnel looks like. That may be one day later, that data is going to be stale, or 14 days later, that whole funnel may have rolled off the screen. So they have to recreate that data every single time you launch a demo. They have to allow you to customize it for language, customize it for currency, customize it for, if you're selling to a bank, you want it to look like financial services data. If you're selling it to an insurance company in the Northwest, you'd want it to look like a Seattle company that's selling to insurance companies. So they have to be able to do that all on the fly using AI, and they have to connect it to your production database or your production application. So it's something that's fundamentally hard, which I like.
What's like, I guess like, is this the tech part that's hard, or like is this like the, I guess, go to market that you feel like is hard?
It's a fundamentally hard technical problem. So every time one of their customers pushes a change to their production application, it's going to break the live demo experience. And so like they have to have AI that constantly monitors what's happening, what change was made, and then AI has to rewrite the connectors literally in real time. Like this is a fundamentally hard problem. Hopefully over time it'll get easier, but that's what makes it so fun.
I wonder, how do you find these like deals? Because obviously when I saw like Salio's website, like SalesLoft is like their client. Obviously, I feel like that explains how like winning deal kind of look like. But I guess like, how do you like, what's in your roadmap on the entire sales cycle? Like, can you maybe articulate on like the sales journey of like a regular SDR, like a sales team, like what kind of character there is, and then how do you think about AI is playing into like the different subsector in this domain? And then obviously what you just described is like very important for like doing a live demo. But besides live demo, there's like, you know, I know the other day I was like looking at a map, there's like the sales coaching call. That's like a really popular thing for AI to do. And then there's like the AI sales, which is like Sensation or whatever, like just like literally you just like yeah, it can just like swap you to AI and then just make like AI demos or like AI like just like sales calls or like AI employee training program or something. And then there's like also I guess like we just have Dell Patsy CTO. So like based on like earlier like 2 hours ago, and then on the pod, and then that's like another like we're talking about like real life transcription. So like basically you the voice AI like that's apply into like the sales journey. I guess like what are some other stuff that you feel like are actually in this domain and that you find exciting?
I mean, I think voice agents are going to be really powerful in this domain.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've invested in a number of them. Most of them haven't been announced, but I think 2025 is going to be a year of voice. And you'll see folks starting kind of on the early side where it's like a voice agent may just do qualification, right? It may qualify someone as an interested buyer and then hand it off to a human. And over time, I think those voice agents will get better and better and handle more and more. And so not just in customer service, but we're definitely seeing it start in sales. I think that's probably going to be a pretty big trend. I also think, at least on the AI front, so much of it is how do I get better, clean data to my sales organization so they can take the best actions. Like I see quite a few companies in that space. Yeah.
What do you mean by like so like qualifying the clean data to the organization? Is that like, so for example, they remove all the emails that are like not gonna go through, or like what does that entail for that?
I mean, let's say you're a company, you have a whole bunch of people visit your website, but you don't know anything about them. Like AI can hopefully go out and start grabbing and saying, hey, I know this IP is from this company. This person filled out this form, but they only filled out their name. Here's their email. Here's their phone number. Here's like, they also visited these other websites that show intent to buy. Like it can start to just create a very rich picture. And so if you have better data, hopefully your sales team can make better decisions.
For sure. So like you invest in another company called Coalesce.
Yeah.
Coalesce.
We talked about that one earlier. It's the transformation company.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I wonder. So like, when you are, so I guess like, what do you feel like separate this transformation company versus like other transformation company?
Yeah. So right now there's really only two major transformation companies. It's kind of why we chose that space, was it wasn't this crowded. There's a company called DBT. I don't know what it stands for, but I like to think it stands for does bad transformations. They basically created a kind of an open source framework that people can use to write their SQL. And then Coalesce took a different approach. Coalesce took the approach of more of a drag and drop user interface that would allow somebody who's a power user to work much faster and not have to write perfect SQL to do the transformations and joins they want to do. And so, Coalesce has been very successful, particularly with companies that have smaller data teams, but still need to do a lot of work.
I wonder, so why is like the open source framework bad?
It's not bad in and of itself. It's just a different way of doing it. Like, so in that case, they're focused on engineers who want to write every line of SQL, and so they enable that. Whereas Coalesce says, hey, just drag and drop, connect tables, and we'll basically write all the SQL in the back end automatically. So it's just different approaches. I think enterprises with smaller data teams have been excited about what Coalesce has built. And then teams that are more like bottoms up engineers adopting it have generally wanted to do their own, more of their own open source.
I wonder, so you also invest in like a fintech company or fintech infrastructure company, Justify? Oh, okay. How do you think about like, I guess like, what's the difference between like, I guess like a fintech infrastructure versus like a traditional, like, I guess like data infrastructure company?
Yeah, so Justify is basically providing infrastructure so that anybody can become a payments facilitator.
Mhm.
And so it's different from like Stripe, where Stripe is just saying, hey, use our APIs and you can accept payments. This is basically saying, here's all of the infrastructure related to processing payments on behalf of other people. Now you can be a payments provider to your end customers. So it's like another level of abstraction. And what they do is they help really big platforms or really big vertical software companies enable the ability for their end customers to offer payments. So maybe
Wait, so yeah, keep going. Sorry.
like an example. So there's a company called I don't know if I want to give specific examples. So maybe I'll give a generic example. So if you're a vertical software company and you sell to like home services providers, so your end customers, maybe you have 1,000 small home service providers on your platform. Right now, maybe they can't take credit card processing, then maybe they just use a square thing on their phone to take credit cards. But instead, you want them to process credit cards directly through your mobile app. So you would sign up for Justify. They would handle all the payments infrastructure so that you could enable your end customers to take credit cards through the mobile app. I don't know if that made sense.
Okay, say it again. Sorry.
Okay.
No, I took a lot of notes. Like I was like literally furiously typing. But okay, so say the difference between Stripe and this thing. So like Stripe is like you give me an API and then I incorporate it into my business. I mean, obviously, I feel like I've used Stripe before, so like it's just like
Stripe would be like if I'm a home services provider, like I'm a plumber, right? I could use, if I had my own website or my own app, I could hook Stripe in and take payments, right? But let's say I use a plumbing software, Joe's plumbing software, and it like manages my calendar, manages my email and my customers and everything. Joe's plumbing software has 1,000 plumbers on the platform. If they use Justify in their app, then each of those 1,000 plumbers could take payments, and they would all
okay, got it.
They'd all be separate accounts. They'd all have their own separate stuff, but it enables the plumbing software company to actually provide that for their end customers.
How do you find this company? Also, the company's in Minnesota. It's giving niche.
Well,
sorry. I don't think it's a niche problem, but like I do think it's like like you have to dig.
Yeah, a lot of times I try to get away from California during the winter, so I go to Minnesota. It's a great place to visit. I'm just kidding.
This is from a visit.
Justify. I was on a board, or I am on a board called Total Expert in Minneapolis, and that company has an investor from Rally Ventures, and so Rally Ventures incubated Justify and brought me in as the first investor. So, I mean, almost all of the companies that I've invested in, they either come from being thesis driven, so having a point of view on a specific industry and trying to meet everybody and then make a bet. And the other way they come in through is from referrals, like Together referring me to RC or SalesLoft referring me to Salio. Like sometimes you just get little pockets where the entrepreneurs know each other.
I think the problem is like, how do you kind of like having the I guess like what's your diligence process kind of look like? So some people would say, hey, like I'm just chatting with like 50 of their potential customer, or like I introduce them to a big client and see if they can land.
Grace,
or
Grace,
what's your vibe?
We don't do diligence. We're vibe investors now.
Okay, since 1999, so obviously it's vibe. But okay, so how do you vibe with this thing?
So we have a very structured diligence process. We have Emergence is unique in that we do venture as a team sport. So when we make when we elevate a company to what we call priority status, meaning that week everybody on the team is diving in, every GP is going to call a customer. The principals running the diligence process, they're coordinating all of this. We're going to be tearing apart their financials. We're going to be looking at their customer metrics, talk to industry experts. Like we will do it all as quickly as possible. Generally speaking, it's about a week. And then we'll get together and make a decision. So it's a very structured process. I'm really happy to say that we've perfected it over 20 years and it works really well, but it's a lot of work.
That's crazy. So like everyone have to call the same call customer of the same company.
Yeah. So there's a total of 7 partners. If we get 7 customer references, great. A lot of times we're also just finding them off list. So if they're if they're a Series A and they've got 40 customers, we should be able to find a few of them and get to the buyer ourselves. But the idea is, like every partner should do a customer reference or a CEO reference.
I have a question for the customer reference. So like for the customer call, like do you just like pull from your network, or do you pull from like, I mean, obviously they'll give you like, let's say 3 customers or something. And then they're like, hey, you can call these 3 people. They're all going to say amazing things most times. But like, what about, oh, okay. So I'll be surprised. But anyway, I'm not surprised. I know that like, it's never, smooth sailing as someone who sells anything to the world. But anyway, but I wonder, so what is like the back end kind of look like? Like, what do you want to get out of the customer call? Like, it's like, because you can't be like interrogating like the person, right? So like, for example, you can't be like too salesy. And then like, what do you tell them? Like you're telling them you're the investor of blah, blah, blah company, or like you're thinking about investing in blah, blah, blah company. I think that's bad. So you have to like really go for, I guess, like the customer approach, or like, how many plumbing business are you doing this year? Or like, that kind of stuff, or how do you navigate these like diligence things? Because I think it's kind of hard.
I mean, generally speaking, we just try to be transparent and say, hey, we're looking at the space. We're excited about what this company is doing. And for me, what I'm looking for is I want to feel the passion from that customer that like, if you took this away from me, I would be really pissed off. Like I would consider quitting my job if I couldn't use this software product anymore, or I would pay for it myself if the company decided not to pay for it. It's that valuable. Like I want to feel that market pull. And I also want to hear things like, like this, I've tried to solve this problem before and I wasn't able to. Or I tried to build a little side project and this was just better. Like those types of things, that there's real pain. Things I don't want to hear. I don't want to hear, oh, this company's great because they do everything I asked them to do. Or, this company's great because it's so cheap. So there's things that customer references will say, and you're kind of shocked that they say it, but yeah, you'll actually pick up quite a lot of information.
I wonder like how much like the good signal that you have to like actually pull the trigger. Just because another thing I could think of is like as a small angel investor, like whenever I hear about like let's say when you hear like a selective amount of feedback, then you are easily to like pull the trigger if it's like your friends, like you're biased. But like as like if you're investing on the professional level, you have to hear like from I guess like various different customers profile to like get comfortable with it. I guess like what would be the benchmark for you to identify the category, and then how much do you spend on like studying the competitors as well? Because some VCs will literally call like I don't know like 600 of their competitors to get like a feedback on everything to actually have the entire map called. But like what would be your approach for that?
Yeah, when we're building a thesis, we're going to talk to every vendor in the space, and we're going to talk to as many customers in this space to try to get a feel for what the truth is. So ultimately, like our job is we're seeking truth. We're trying to piece together a puzzle by getting as many puzzle pieces as possible. We're not going to get the full picture, and then we have to make a call. Ultimately, though, like we're betting on people. Like we're primarily seed and Series A, so like we're ultimately betting on a team, and every piece of evidence that we're collecting is really towards the goal of, is this team executing well? Are they learning quickly? Are they running fast? Do they understand the customer pain point? Are they solving it? Like it's really all this information is about building conviction in a team.
What would you say? What would you recommend founders to do? I feel like because I feel like I consult some founders, and then like a repetitive question I've heard is like founders are worried about if they're pitching. Let's say I know that like you're let's say you're a sales tool investor, and then I'm a sales tool, and then if I pitch you, if you have invested in like a company in that space, maybe adjacent space or something, should I pitch you, or like should I like some people are fear of like other VCs taking their information. Obviously, I don't think you should care as much, but like obviously I think people have a lot of fears on like, how much you would share in like investor call, or like, which investor should you pick to share? Like, do they have to invest in your direct category, or like, do they invest in an adjacent category and then like maybe later stage than you, or something like that? How do you think about, from like a founder perspective, on going to yourself or like other investors when they're like pitching a particular space?
I think it's a great thing to think about. So one, I don't think they should talk to anyone who has a direct competitive investment if they're materially involved with the company, right? So if they wrote a $100K check and they're not on the board and they have no visibility, then it probably doesn't matter. But if they led a Series A and they're on the board, then you probably shouldn't talk to them. And that's really up to the founder to decide and do the research. So if I think something's remotely competitive, I just start the call by saying, hey, just so you know, I'm involved in this company. Do you think they're competitive? I had one last week where the guy said, wow, I didn't know that. I do think it's competitive. Can we just stay friends? And I was like, cool, no problem. Because we don't always know what a company is doing, because sometimes their websites, especially early, might be like pretty vague. And then they may be talking about moving in a direction, something could be more competitive. So I try to handle it that way. But founders should definitely be aware and try not to talk to companies, investors who have direct investments. Some of the mega funds, it's really hard. Like, they have so many people doing so many things, it's almost impossible for them not to have, conflicts. But I just view that as not great for the entrepreneur.
For I guess like the other part is like, for a startup, like, so if they're reached by a VC, like how should they like understand like how fast the VC are deploying? So sometimes I think about like, I would just ask the VC about like the life cycle of your fund, or like, how frequently are you deploying? When was the last time you read a check? So how do you think about the frequency of deployment? And then like, does it like relate to where you are at the fund cycle?
I mean, for us, we believe in time diversification. So for us, we try to have 4-year fund cycles and try to deploy a fourth of the fund each year, which means each partner is doing 1 to 1.5 investments on average per year. Like that's our strategy. But there are other funds that try to deploy their entire fund in 18 months. So I think it's a little more nuanced. You have to kind of understand how funds work. Ultimately, though, like if you're fundraising, you're just kissing a lot of frogs. Like, you got to talk to a lot of investors. I tell people, if they're going out to raise a Series A, they should have a target list that's between 30 and 50 funds, because you have to find that right match, and it might take a while.
For the company that went to you, as you mentioned, like, some are introduced by like portfolio founders or like other investors who invest in some stuff that you have invested in before. How should they approach for like a warm intro? Because like not everyone have like warm intro, or like went to like what's in like the right network in the past.
Yeah, I actually don't think it's that important. What I do think is important is that you have researched the investor and there's a reason why you think it makes sense. And so like I get a ton of cold inbound, and I read everything. I don't respond to all of it, but I read it all. And if someone has a great cold inbound message, like, yeah, I'll answer.
What would be in the cold inbound message that will make you feel like they research you? Is it like mentioning portfolio companies, or like what's
no, it's like, hey, I read your thesis piece on the modern data stack. Here's some things I agree with. Here's maybe some things that you should think about. And I'm building a company in this space. Like, what do you think? Or, I'm building in this space. Like, here's my point of view. Like those tend to go over better than like doing zero research. Like, you can tell when you get a generic email that they've sent to 1,000 people.
What about like, I guess the other question is like, should they ask for advice, or should they ask for like money directly? It's like, hey, we're raising this round, blah, 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 blah. And then they send a deck.
I think it depends on what your, what your stage is and kind of what your focus is. So for example, we all know that the reason why you're reaching out is because you eventually want to fundraise, right? But I think if you have time, then I would much rather prefer like, hey, I want to build a relationship. Can we get on the phone and talk about X? And X could be something very specific. Like, that's fine. But if you're fundraising now, like don't say you want advice if you're fundraising now. Like you probably should just be upfront about like, I'm in cycle and I want to know if you're interested.
I guess like for another question in that adjacent domain is like, how do you think about portfolio construction? Like, as you mentioned, like each partner invests in like 1 or 1.5 deals, like yearly. And like, how do you think about like, do you double down on every company, or like when they're raising the next round, you just like, you know, make a new
great question. This is a great question. I taught a class on this recently. I wish we had more time because I would actually go more in depth. The short answer is, like, for a venture capital firm, the best, like, it's a power laws dictate returns. And so the only thing that matters for a specific fund is that they're in at least one really big winner. And that one big winner will kind of return everything. And so the moment you feel like you know who that winner is, you want to deploy as much capital as possible into that winner. Because even the second round and third round are probably still going to be better returns than every other investment in that fund. But you don't know in the beginning. So our philosophy generally is let's support the companies in the Series B, and then we should be hands off at that point. And if something becomes a clear breakout winner like Zoom was, then we should try to lead a subsequent round or invest more in that company. But for the most part, it's how can we get our ownership in the Series A and then support that company in the B, and then hopefully by that point they have, they're on the right path.
I want to ask, okay, so another question, I'll be quick, but I want to ask like another question. It's like, okay, for all the Series A companies that they have some sort of metrics, and like, what would you say would be the valuation that you are comfortable with? Because I feel like in the AI space, the valuation is like wild at all time. And then nowadays, a lot of people are saying that like you don't really need beyond Series A anymore because it's an AI company. You can just build with a small team and then reach like, the cursor effect, just like literally small team, raise small amount of money, and then you just like go off, make a lot of revenue. Do you think that's sustainable? And then how do you think about the valuation?
Yeah, I mean, I think every investor is always going to say the valuations are too high, but valuation is just a function of market demand, right? It's just supply and demand. So the best companies raise at high prices. That's always been true. So really it just becomes, is it a big enough opportunity to support a really big outcome? And if the answer is yes, then you kind of have to hold your nose and do the price.
What about like, so because of like, let's say, what would be the best benchmark in terms of like, monthly revenue or like client base that you want to see at the Series A stage?
I mean,
if there's like any,
it varies wildly because we've done Series A's that are still pre-revenue, right? And I think that's more true in companies where they have to build a lot of core tech. And then in companies that are maybe less core tech, that some of these AI companies that can build on top of big models, like we're seeing them go like 0 to 4 million in a year, 0 to 5 million in a year, and so like that's a much higher benchmark than it used to be. SaaS applications 5 years ago, it was great if you were going 0 to 1, 1 to 4, like that was a pretty solid looking company. So the game's up leveled a little bit.
What are the companies that are making dramatic amount of revenue? I mean, I've heard like the seed company that make like 6 or 7 million within a month or something, but I don't really know what category they're in.
Well, so I invested in Bolt.new. They were very public that they went 0 to 20 in 8 weeks. So, I mean, that was a crazy, it's probably the fastest growing company I've ever seen in my career in software. And that momentum has just continued. It's 3 more months and they continue to grow like a weed. So it's been super impressive.
What would be your like specialties on like, how do you like kind of win this kind of deals? Because I feel like they must have like every investor trying to fight to get in and stuff.
They did. So I guess I was lucky. I'd met Eric, the CEO, three years earlier when he was raising a prior round. And I built a good relationship and I really liked him. It just wasn't quite the right fit for us. And ironically, I gave him one of my comic books. And
amazing. That's a deal that you went from the comic book?
I think so. So when I messaged him last, I think September, he was like, dude, I just had a daughter like a few months ago, and he sent me a picture of her reading with the book, and I was like, and I think that his daughter was probably like 7 or 8 months old at the time, and I was like, that is so cool. And then we agreed to meet up, and he was thinking about fundraising, and he wound up getting a whole bunch of term sheets. But building a good relationship still matters in this business, because ultimately, if we're successful, we're going to be working together for the next 20 years. So I think you want to choose partners that you have that kind of relationship with.
Wait, I have a 30-second question and a 30-second fire round.
Sure.
So I mean, how do you reject someone and then still be BFF with them?
It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen all the time. Generally, I just try to be really transparent. Unless the answer is I don't like you, which sometimes is the case. That's the only time where I won't be transparent. But most of the time, I just try to be transparent and say, here's the reasons why we're passing. And I try to do it either on a phone call or a very detailed email. If I only met them once, I might do it on an email. But if I've met them multiple times, I'm going to pick up the phone and just have that conversation. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I've had people tell me to F off. So so it doesn't always go smoothly, but sometimes it does, and they still want to work with you.
Wow. Okay, let's do the fire round. Okay, what's your favorite book?
Favorite book? Can I say my
Your
own?
book.
Is that a cop out? No, I won't say that. I haven't read that many books lately. I read Caves of Steel recently. It's like an old sci-fi book that a friend of mine, Morgan, he's a CTO at a company, he gave me. He thought I might like it, and I actually really liked it. So I probably don't read that much for fun, though.
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
Ooh. There's a couple people. This guy, Henry Wong, he was my mentor in banking. He made a huge impact in terms of work ethic, putting customers first. He taught me everything I know about financial modeling, and gave me a skill set that I've used my entire life since. And then another old boss, Virginia Turzin, got me the job at Emergence, which is the single greatest thing that's ever happened to me. So I have her to thank for that. And then my team and partners at Emergence. I mean, I learned so much from them. They have carried me up the hill on this career path, and I'm forever grateful.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Who would I invite to a dinner party? I would invite a great DJ, because you need to have good music for a dinner party. So either my buddy Alex at Mantis or someone else. And I would want really entertaining people. So there's someone on my team.
Did you just name drop the Chainsmokers? I'm sorry, but keep going.
He's another venture capitalist. He's awesome. Tammy on my team is like the best person for a dinner party. She entertains everybody. She comes with questions that are like, hey, like 40 ways to fall in love with an entrepreneur. And it's like these deep questions about like your childhood. And then it's, so she's great at like icebreakers and making a dinner party fun. You probably have to invite some people who like to cook. My partner, Kevin, likes to cook. So he might be fun to have at a dinner party. He also likes wine. I would just want to make it a fun group. I would invite Rick Zulo. Rick Zulo is another seed investor. Guy likes to drink, so that it would be a very, very fun event.
Where can we find you outside of work?
You can find me on a mountain snowboarding or skiing during the winter, and in the summer you can find me in the lake wake surfing.
Love that. Well, Joe, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was such a fun conversation.
By the way, I think Rick's going to kill me for that. Let me just say, I would invite Rick because he's awesome, not because he likes to drink.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let me quickly. Oh, hi, Tyler. Just wanted to say hi to the audience.
Oh, no, that means Tyler heard that.
Anyway. Okay, so let me quickly answer.